evening. I'm Michele Greenstein, filling in for Rick Sanchez. Let's get started. We are witnessing the emergence of 5G, the fifth generation of wireless technology. 5G is currently being rolled out in cities across the country. In fact, here's a map of all the cities with either 5G coverage currently or plans for 5G coverage later on, either from AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, or Verizon. 5G is the groundwork for the wireless industry, what they're calling the Internet of Things. A system in which everything from your car to your dishwasher to your door lock to your baby's diapers will be connected to the Internet. If something can be connected, it will be connected in a 5G world. But don't take it from me. Take it from the man who used to head the Federal Communications Commission, the agency which is supposed to be in charge of regulating the wireless industry.
If something can be connected, it will be connected in a 5G world. Autonomous vehicles, smart city energy grids, transportation networks, and water systems. Hundreds of billions of microchips. The 5G revolution will touch all corners of our country.
But this 5G revolution may have a dark side. As it turns out, wireless radiation has biological effects. Published, peer-reviewed science already shows that today's technology creates radio frequencies that pose a threat to both the human body and to animals, not to mention to the environment. These existing health effects of wireless radiation are worthy of attention because in order for 5G to work efficiently, cell towers will need to be installed everywhere. That's why over 200 doctors and scientists worldwide are now cautioning that we need research on the health effects of 5G before its rollout. In a moment, you'll be hearing from one of those doctors, with more on the ramifications this new generation of wireless tech may have on your health. But first, let's consider that the brain tumors, infertility, memory loss, nausea, neurological disorders, and anxiety may not even be the worst 5G has to offer. Because with 5G also comes the potential to turn every device into a way for the state to spy on you. Again, don't take it from me. Take it from Mr. James Clapper, former director of National Intelligence, who said that in the future, intelligence services might use the Internet of Things for identification, surveillance, monitoring, location tracking, and targeting for recruitment. Take it from David Petraeus, former director of the CIA, who said, transformational is an overused word, but I do believe it properly applies to these technologies, particularly to their effect on clandestine tradecraft. These technologies could lead to rapid integration of data from closed societies and provide near-continuous, persistent monitoring of virtually anywhere we choose. So why is the federal government allowing for the rollout of 5G and even encouraging it? Well, maybe one of the reasons is that 5G offers security agencies unprecedented access to the data on our lives, to not only the information we choose to share online, but the information we don't. It's the news with Rick Sanchez. Let's do news again. Here are the questions we think you'll be asking tomorrow. Will we be protected from the potential dangers of 5G? What's behind the U.S. military buildup in Africa? And how many black holes are in our galaxy? Let's get started. Not only is the government failing to take into consideration the health effects of 5G before rolling it out, it's actually passing laws to fast-track this rollout. These laws make it the right of way in front of homes. It makes them available sites for 5G transmitters without the consent of property owners. Here to explain why this may be so dangerous is Dr. Martin Pall, Professor Emeritus of Biochemistry and Basic Medical Sciences at Washington State University and the author of 5G, Great Risk for EU, the US, and International Health. Compelling evidence for 8 distinct types of great harm caused by electromagnetic field exposures and the mechanism that causes them. Before we get into how 5G, this new generation of wireless technology, which will drastically increase our exposure, is a threat to the human body, what evidence do we have that the electromagnetic fields that we already are exposed to are harmful given our current levels of exposure?
Well, we have about 10,000 papers that have been published and many, many hundreds of reviews that have been published that clearly show that there are massive effects on our bodies based on the exposures we already have.
So what exactly is going to be changing when 5G rolls out? Is it a simple case of more exposure, or is it a different type of frequency?
It's not so much the frequency, although that's important. It's the pulsations that are the critical thing. 5G is designed to carry gigantic amounts of information, as you've already stated. And the way that information is carried is by pulsations. We know that the pulsations make these electromagnetic fields much, much more dangerous. And 5G, therefore, is designed to be vastly more dangerous than anything that we've been exposed to date.
In some of your work, I've seen evidence of effects on fertility in both male and female bodies. I've seen neuropsychiatric effects and cellular DNA damage, which of course can lead to cancer. We've also got apoptosis. Can you explain how we've come to these conclusions? I mean, is this just one study? Is this multiple studies? How can we back up these claims?
Oh, there are many, many, many studies on each of these, and there are quite a number of review articles that have been published on each of those effects. There are also other effects that occur that are life-threatening as well. So, you know, we have, for example, cardiac effects that produce that are life-threatening, and so you know, so there's huge amounts of information on each of these things. And so there should be no question that they're going on, and they're going on based on exposures of the sorts that we already have. Exposures from cell phone tower radiation, from cell phone radiation, from cordless phone radiation, from Wi-Fi, from smart meters, etc. All these things produce effects.
Now, to play devil's advocate, one can say that, hey, if you don't want to be exposed, don't buy a cell phone. Don't buy a wireless router. What would you say to those people?
Well, I would say you shouldn't do it. That's I don't have a cell phone. I don't have Wi-Fi in my house. I do everything wired to the extent that it possibly can be. So it's perfectly possible to do almost everything that you want to do in a wired configuration, which are much, much safer than the way we're doing things by and large. So yeah, I agree with I agree with your point. Yeah.
Right, and to a certain extent, with the rollout of 5G, you may not even be able to escape yourself from this exposure risks if we're having small cell towers being installed all around the country. Now, what can you tell us about the way entities like the FDA or the National Cancer Institute have been handling this information?
Well, the problem is that in the U.S., the government funding for doing research in this area was cut off between 1986 and 1999. And since that time, the only thing the government has been doing is to push these technologies out, and there's absolutely no effort to determine what kinds of health effects are being created. Fortunately, there's a lot of very good evidence from studies that are going on elsewhere. But the U.S., and we take great pride in our science, and as an American scientist, I really hate to say this, but American science basically is nowhere in this area because there's simply no funding.
Something that stood out to me is the possibility of oxidative stress. In your paper, 5G, Great Risk for EU, the US, and International Health, you know that there are multiple studies linking the exposure of electromagnetic frequencies with oxidative stress. Can you explain to us why we should care about a term like oxidative stress? What kind of ramifications does this have on our health?
Well, oxidative stress and free radical damage, which is associated with it, have important roles in causing essentially every chronic disease that we suffer from. So these are very, very important in terms of human disease mechanisms.
In your opinion, why is it that we see so little coverage about the risks of this rollout, which is already occurring in this country in the mainstream corporate media?
I think it's probably because there's so much industry money that's going into advertising that so much of the media has simply been, in effect, been corrupted by the industry money. And it's really tragic because, as I say, there are literally thousands of studies that show that there are major impacts on human health. There are hundreds of review articles that show there are major impacts on human health based on the exposures we already have. And we have every reason to think that 5G will be much more dangerous because of the pulsations and because of the incredible large numbers of antennae that will be all over the place, making it almost impossible to avoid these exposures.
Dr. Martin Pall, thank you for being with me. This is both fascinating and a bit scary, I have to say.
So you haven't heard that we're the ones covering the stories that you won't see covered anywhere else? In Venezuela, Kazakhstan, let's go to Hong Kong. And the media reaction to that has been crickets. How about the way we cover those stories? What the hell does that mean? Huawei, Huawei, Huawei. That's the key word in this case, uprising. Keep, can you believe that? Watching. This is the right thing for members of the media to do, to actually pick sides. Look, if you like what you see, subscribe.